I'm a 42-year-old man who has found myself in the midst of a family drama that has caused me to lose faith in my family's ability to be loyal and trustworthy. My 64-year-old father, a heavy diesel mechanic who has served as my mentor and business partner for over a decade, recently disclosed information that completely upended my world. Just to give you some background, he has spent his entire professional life running a small mechanic workshop. My dad's work has always captivated me as a child, and on the weekends I would always help out in his workshop. I decided to pursue a degree in automotive engineering because of this interest in order to formally join my dad's company. Since the year 23. As I've been helping my dad out as a mechanic, I've been assuming more and more responsibility until I eventually took over running his workshop. My dad had a single car with just 2 part-time mechanics when I first started working at the workshop. I used my training and experience to my advantage to apply a number of fresh approaches that resulted in notable progress. We've grown to over 35 employees and a fleet of 15 cars over the past 10 years. We grew financially so quickly that this fiscal year's revenue, which was only $250,000, is almost $7 million. My dad's primary responsibilities have remained in the workshop, and I have assumed a managerial role that is more office-focused. I have dedicated the last 10 years of my life to changing our family business, constructing it from the ground up. Not all of my difficulties, hardships, and sacrifices have been for my own benefit. I have worked countless hours and made many sacrifices. Their motivation stemmed from the conviction that I would eventually acquire this enterprise and carry on its growth. It evolved into more for me than just a job. It was my duty and my passion. I've navigated through tough times, braved through various storms, and rejoiced in our successes, all with a steadfast dedication. My older brother Michael, who's 48, took a different path in life. He went to university and then carved out a career as an accountant in the city. Unlike me, he never showed any interest in our dad's mechanic business. In fact, growing up, he had a strong disdain for it. He was embarrassed that our dad was a mechanic and would often refuse to even acknowledge it in front of our friends. When I was helping out our dad in the workshop, Michael would get angry with me, insisting that such work was beneath us. Despite my growing passion for automobiles and my decision to pursue a degree in that field, Michael consistently tried to discourage me. He would tell me that my degree in automobile engineering was a dead end and that I should aim for a more prestigious career. Interestingly, despite his clear embarrassment over our dad's profession, my dad always saw Michael as his golden child. This favoritism remained apparent even though Michael had little to no interest in the family business and the work our father did. There was a time when things weren't like this. My dad used to show equal affection to both of us. However, everything changed when Michael was 15. He contracted pneumonia and became bedridden, causing a great deal of worry for our family. The doctors expressed serious concerns about his health, even warning us that he might be at risk of dying. It was an incredibly difficult period for all of us. I vividly recall the fear and anxiety I felt about the possibility of losing Michael during his entire hospital stay. It was a defining moment that seemed to shift the dynamics in our family. Michael always wanted our dad above anyone else. He used to ask for our dad all the time. My dad spent countless nights in the hospital, which meant they bonded a lot. Eventually, Michael recovered, and things went back to normal. Yet my dad continued to favor Michael over the years, even when Michael would grow up to hate our dad's profession. Dad didn't mind and favored him regardless. As I got older, I obviously noticed this favoritism and was understandably hurt that our father always favored Michael. For example, once my school had an award ceremony where I was going to be presented an award, I was extremely proud that I won the award and told my parents about it. My mother hugged me while my dad smiled warmly, congratulating me. I informed my parents that the school had invited them to attend our award ceremony. I was aware that my mother might not be able to make it, given her demanding job. With long night shifts at the hospital, which left her exhausted during the day. So, with a sense of expectation, I turned to my dad, hoping he would confirm his attendance. He looked back at me with a hint of hesitation, his eyes shifting towards my mother. She then turned to him, asking if he could make it to the ceremony to be there for me. My dad then cleared his throat and said that he had plans to play basketball with Michael. My mother looked at him angrily and told him that playing basketball with Michael wasn't important, and he could take Michael with him to attend my award ceremony instead. My dad nodded begrudgingly, in agreement. The night before the event, my mother reminded my dad during dinner to make sure he showed up at my award ceremony. Michael, who was sitting at the dinner table, asked my dad if he was canceling on him for that basketball practice. My dad explained to him that they could always play basketball the next week. Michael immediately started expressing his discontentment, saying how he was looking forward to having father-son time and didn't want to waste his time for my ceremony. My mom fired back at him, scolding my big brother for lacking empathy and support. Considering I had just clinched an award, she even went as far as demanding that our dad pull himself together for once and be there for me on the big day. I had to desperately remind my dad once more as I headed to school, hoping he wouldn't let me down again. He told me not to worry about it and that he would be there during my award ceremony. I looked around for my dad everywhere, but I couldn't find him. My name was eventually called up, and I had to go up to the stage to collect my award. I remember receiving my award from the principal while my schoolmates cheered, and I was fervently looking for my dad's face in the crowd. He never showed up. I sent my mother a message saying that my dad never showed up. She immediately called me, concerned, asking me if I was sure that my dad didn't show up, and I told her how he wasn't anywhere to be found. And maybe he must have forgotten. My mother told me that was impossible, as she had put 5 alarms on his phone, and she couldn't see his car parked in front of our house, which meant he was definitely out at this point. We were gripped with anxiety, fearing that something dreadful might have occurred upon returning home from school. I cautiously pushed the door open and was met with the sight of my mom and dad engaged in a furious and explosive confrontation. Their voices were raised to a deafening pitch, and the atmosphere was so tense that you could practically cut it with a knife. The fiery argument between my parents reverberated through the entire hallway, leaving me in shock and disbelief. My mother, her face contorted with anger, stood near the entrance while my dad, looking both guilty and defensive, was attempting to justify his actions. Feeling a mixture of confusion and concern, I cautiously stepped into our living room. I asked my dad curiously if he was okay. My worry palpable as I mentioned that he never showed up at my school for the award ceremony. The room fell silent for the moment, while my dad tried to avoid eye contact and mumbled an apology. Something about losing track of time and unforeseen circumstances. I could sense that his explanation wasn't adding up. But before I could press further, my mother unleashed a torrent of frustration and disappointment. "Why did you show up, John?" she demanded, her voice sharp and accusatory. "Tell me the truth. Our son won an award and you promised him you would be there." What could be more important than that? Dad shifted uncomfortably, clearly aware that he was in the hot seat before he could respond. Michael entered the room with an air of nonchalance, eating an ice cream. My mother turned her ire towards Michael, her eyes narrowing in disbelief and anger. "Michael, what on earth were you and your dad thinking? Where were you guys when your brother needed you the most, on his big day?" Michael responded with an indifferent shrug, casually mentioning that he had a sudden craving for ice cream and had convinced our dad to take him to the ice cream shop first. As if that weren't bad enough, they then proceeded to my school, only to find out that they had missed the entire award ceremony, and so they simply drove back home, leaving me high and dry. My mother's face turned from anger to incredulity as she processed this absurd excuse. "You skipped your brother's award ceremony for ice cream," she screamed, her voice rising incredulously. "You and your father missed his big moment because you wanted ice cream among the rising stress." My dad, instead of apologizing and recognizing his error, sought to defend Michael and justify his behavior, stammering out an explanation that simply added gasoline to the flames. Look, it's not a huge deal. He began attempting to downplay the significance of my award ceremony. "It's only an award ceremony, and there will be more in the future." Michael requested an ice cream, and I figured we could just grab a fast one. I didn't think it was such a big issue. His comments hit me like a punch to the belly. I couldn't wrap my brain around it. The guy I had counted on my own father was downplaying the value of my accomplishment, the way he casually discarded the moment I had been eagerly anticipating. His words lingering in the air left me totally stunned. What had begun as absolute incredulity now morphed into a tremendous blend of wrath and grief, a potent potion of irritation and sadness surging through me. A knot grew in my throat and I felt the sting of unshared tears. My achievement, the praise for my hard work and effort, was being tossed aside as meaningless. But at that very moment, I understood that it went beyond simply skipping the ceremony. It had to do with the people who were closest to me not understanding me, not offering me encouragement, and giving me the depressing impression that my achievements were not appreciated. I looked at my father, the one I had come to rely on, my eyes conveying a tumultuous blend of incredulity and treachery. I looked just as deeply disappointed as I felt, and it was evident in my expression. My mother, however, did not hold back as she expressed her own sadness and chastised them both for prioritizing an impulsive ice cream need above a significant life milestone. Their furious dispute continued. I kept feeling hurt and betrayed, which made the situation even more chaotic. I also felt like there was a lump in my throat and a huge weight on my chest. I forced a meek smile and said, "It's okay, Dad. Put it out of your mind." The words, pushed out to cover up the intense feelings churning inside of me, tasted harsh on my tongue. I didn't want to intensify the disagreement or make the already tense situation worse. I walked back to my room, the door firmly shut behind me, and the facade I'd painstakingly built for my dad crumbled. At last, I released. My face was streaming with tears that I had been fighting to contain in front of my parents. I felt completely overwhelmed by the overwhelming weight of sadness, the sting of betrayal, and the profound sensation of being let down. When my mother saw that I was sad, she came to my room to console me. She put her arm around my shoulder as she sat next to me. She remained silent. "Please just let me cry and express how I feel." I felt a little bit better knowing she was there for me because of her comforting presence. She finally said something softly. "You hurt, honey, I know. I regret that you had to endure this. Your dad made a mistake. Errors happen to people, but it doesn't negate your accomplishment. Nothing can take away from the hard effort you put into earning the honor." I started to feel a little lighter after hearing her words, which were like a warm hug for my soul. She stayed by my side till I became calm, telling me that I was still loved and appreciated in spite of the setback. My dad's obvious bias for Michael over me has brutally shown itself on several occasions. My mother has spoken to him several times about this matter. Every time, my dad seems to actually hear me out and tries to be more involved in my life. But it never lasts long. In the end, he goes back to being Michael's great dad. I have noticed this pattern repeatedly for my entire life. Even with these instances of favoritism, I've always made a sincere effort to gain my dad's acceptance. I find his work to be quite fascinating, and I have grown to have a special affection for cars in particular, in part because it appeared like something he treasured, even though it was sometimes felt like a one-sided endeavor. I never gave up on the idea that my efforts would finally pay off and win me my dad's acceptance and appreciation. With the claiming of irreconcilable differences, my dad filed for divorce from my mother last year, ushering in a difficult chapter in our family's history. My father and mother had been having more and more conflicts for a few years now, but I had no idea that they would be getting a divorce. We went through a trying period as a family. My dad has dated multiple younger ladies in the last few months. He called Michael and me in for what he said was an important meal around 5 months ago. The room filled with tension as we took our seats at the table, and I felt a knot grow in my gut as I prepared myself for the shocking news. My dad had a serious look on his face as he prepared to deliver. At last, he broke the silence and started talking. "I would like to share with you both something really essential." Olivia and I tied the knot. He seemed to be expecting us to be ecstatic with his choice, or at the very least, to accept it. Michael and I looked at each other, shocked. His most recent girlfriend, Olivia, was only a few years younger than me at 30. We must have looked shocked, but my dad went on as if he didn't notice our astonishment. He continued by telling how Olivia had made his life happier and more exciting, and how he had found love once more. It was astounding to me that my father had chosen to wed without even asking us to the ceremony or having a conversation with us about it. After making that statement, my dad continued by expressing his pride in the company he had founded and watched flourish over time. He mentioned that he has been considering his company's succession plan recently. I anxiously awaited him to reveal his intentions. My dad turned to face me and told me that after giving it some serious thought, he had come to the conclusion that, as I was not yet married and had no children of my own, I should not expect to inherit the family business. I looked at him completely confused as he went on to explain that he had decided to give Michael full control of the company. Shock and disbelief washed over me in waves, and I felt like I was being betrayed so deeply that I was at a loss for words. My trust in my father crumbled in front of my eyes, and it felt like a fatal blow to the gut dot. As soon as my dad dropped this shocking, a storm of betrayal and anger erupted within me. My whole world, which I had worked so hard to build over 10 years, was collapsing in front of me. I glared at him while clenching my jaw, unable to fully appreciate the significance of his choice. Why, I finally got the words out, roiling with a mixture of hurt and rage. I committed my entire life to this venture. Together, you and I built it. How are you able to just give it to Michael? Dad gave his explanation, not seeming to be fazed by the maelstrom he had created. Michael is married and has children. He can grow the company to new heights, and I think he needs the financial stability. I felt the weight of his partiality falling back on me as his words lingered in the air. I found it difficult to remain composed. I balled my hands into fists. This is unfair. I've thrown my everything into this venture. I've put in a lot of time and effort working with you. And now that Michael has a family, you're just going to ignore me? What about my prospects? My dreams, he answered in a heartless manner. The business goes to your brother, but you can stay in your role and continue to work for Michael. That quote is my ultimate choice. I had to control my fury to keep from retaliating, even though I was furious. I looked at Michael, hoping for any small bit of sympathy or understanding. He said nothing, which disappointed me. Avoiding making eye contact. I was now disappointed in many ways than just my father. It engulfed my brother, who had chosen not to support me at that crucial juncture. I could feel the oppressive weight of a lifetime of preference bearing down on me. It was more than just business as usual. It was the result of years of not feeling good enough. With a flippant wave, I discarded the effort and dedication that I had demonstrated, stepped down. If that's what you want, great, Dad, I mumbled in defeat. I looked away, the sour aftertaste of treachery permeating the atmosphere. I made the decision to leave his place without arguing with him any longer. I was stuck with this abandonment sensation, the knowledge that no matter how hard I struggled to get over my dad, he would still choose his golden kid. Later, when I was by myself at home, the unfairness weighed heavily on me. My life's labor, my legacy, and the business I held dear was evaporating. Anguish surged up, distorting the room and my vision with tears. I had never felt so alone and rejected in my life, feeling completely forsaken. I decided to call my mother, fervently hoping that she would understand how deeply troubled I was. My mother listened with a mixture of amazement and dismay as I related the whole story, from my dad's overt favoritism for Michael to him taking over the family business from me and the overpowering feeling of being adrift. I had no idea he would go to this extent. It was my mother who finally spoke. Her speech carried a hint of regret. It is utterly unfair to treat Michael so much better and give him the entire business rather than splitting it evenly between the two of you. Her statement perfectly captured my feelings. Although I had no problem giving Michael the business, my dad had unfairly given it all to him. My mother's voice changed from surprised to resolute as we continued talking, no matter how hard I had worked over the years. She strongly advised me to try to view this as an opportunity for something new rather than the end. You've accomplished incredible things, therefore you don't need his blessing. Why don't you launch your own company? She said, "You know, a lot of clients would rather work with you than Michael." A glimmer of resolve flared in my mind. My dad was wrong if he believed he could take away everything I had fought so hard for. An unsaid commitment was driven by the hurt of betrayal. From the ashes of everything that had been taken from me during the previous 10 years, I would pave my own route and create something new. I have more than enough money saved up to launch my own company. As the situation's reality hit in the following day, I decided to take matters into my own hands and started moving in that direction. I made contact with a large number of our clientele, especially the ones I had personally recruited over the years. I had developed trusting relationships and solid relationships with these clients. I openly shared that my father intended to transfer ownership of the entire firm to my elder brother, and I explained why I felt compelled to start my own business. The clients were astounded as I was, but amazingly, there was a resoundingly favorable reaction all around. These were individuals who had grown to respect my commitment, my work ethic, and the principles I brought to the table. They gave me their word that they would follow me if I wanted to carry on our fruitful collaboration under a different name. The industry was informed about my departure from the family business, and several of my dad's employees even came up to me to say they were interested in working for me. It seemed as though people were beginning to realize that this would be a sinking ship after my dad left the company, leaving it in Michael's hands. When my father received my resignation letter, he was taken aback. He berated me for leaving the company at such a pivotal time, but I laughed it off and departed as most of the clientele changed their minds. The family's once thriving business began to collapse, and my dad was inadvertently drawn into the turmoil caused by the aftermath from his ambitious plan. He watched helplessly as his well-laid scheme went horribly wrong. Over the next few months, my new business took off. My competence and the steadfast backing of devoted clientele not only ensured my survival, but also helped me to flourish. My rebirth was sparked by my father's betrayal, which caused me to rise from the ashes stronger and more resilient than before. My perseverance is evident in the company I've developed, which is now self-sufficient and flourishing. Now that I've overcome all obstacles with perseverance, hard work, and dedication, I can finally have the last laugh. My mother has informed me that Michael is unable to run the company and is having difficulty retaining the few customers he still has. My dad must have heard about my accomplishment because he wrote me a lengthy note yesterday, calling me a loser for not supporting my brother and preserving the family business and for having abandoned my family. He wrote about how his new wife, Olivia, had threatened to get a divorce from him since he could no longer support her lavish lifestyle due to financial difficulties. He urged me to do what he thought was right as he wrapped up his speech. Going back to the family business and getting all the clients I had gained back in an attempt to turn around our faltering firm. Update 1. I would like to sincerely thank everyone for their insightful counsel and comforting words on my situation. To dispel any misunderstandings. We all knew Michael understood nothing about the inner workings of our family firm, so I'm still not sure why my dad thought it was a good idea for him to take over as CEO. Knowing how well our firm was doing, Michael consented to my father's requests, since he thought this would be an easy job and that I would shoulder the majority of the responsibilities. He had previously told us that he was dissatisfied at his position. I quote, "I'm going to assume that he believed that I would handle the most of the labor-intensive tasks while he and his family could take pleasure in his position as CEO. For those who are curious as to why I haven't gotten married yet, it's just that I've always been rather solitary and committed to my career. Although I have been in a relationship for the past 1.5 years with a woman I like, and we have talked about getting married in the future, we both feel that we should take some time to mature as people before moving forward, whether or not I get married." I never imagined that my dad would give me full control of the company. Given that it would have been equitable and I wouldn't have needed children in the future, I would have been happy to share a 70/30ths or even 50/50ths portion with Michael. My goal was to leave a family legacy by eventually transferring my share of the business to Michael's kids. In any case, there was no justification for my dad to be so cruel and hand Michael the entire company. Since I worked in this industry for 10 years, I should be able to participate in it. Furthermore, I never pressured any of my clients to pick me over my dad's company. I was the one that would always go above and beyond to make sure they were satisfied and to establish enduring relationships, so they chose to work with me. I never wanted our family business to fail or for Michael to fail. The company collapsed because Michael was still inexperienced in running it and because my dad was preoccupied with Olivia and didn't have time to attend to his clients. I guess my dad thought I would ultimately give up on my business and return back to him to beg for his pardon. When I finally give up. because of my unwavering commitment and work. Not only do I remain steadfast, but I also keep getting better. Seeing the steady collapse of a company that I helped to establish is incredibly depressing, but it's important to understand that I never wanted this to happen. Rather, it's a direct result of their own choices. Next week, when I have some free time, I plan to have an open discussion with my dad about these urgent matters. Second update. I finally got to talk to my dad, which had been long overdue. Last Saturday, he invited me to supper and demanded an apology. I visited his home. To my surprise, as soon as I walked inside his apartment, Michael was waiting for me. Thoughts of a resolution crossed my mind as the strained mood persisted. Taking a deep breath, my dad looked at Michael and then unleashed the shock. He began by expressing his grief that our family business was now in shambles and his sadness over what had transpired between us. Raising an eyebrow, I prepared myself for his next move, thinking he would tell me he had changed his mind. Rather, my father began to put pressure on me to get back to the family business as soon as possible, saying that if I did, he would forget and forgive me. Michael interrupted and accused me of being the reason behind the company's downfall, his own struggles, and even calling me a self-centered person for abandoning him to take care of the business on my own. His charges left me speechless. Dad, you didn't even think about my future when you decided to give Michael the whole company. You put this down at my feet, but how? I fired back, letting my annoyance show through. The real problem is that you took most of the clients with you when you left, Michael mocked. That is the source of the issue. The relationships I forged were the reason they followed me, not because I made them do it. You were free to attempt to retrieve them. Your current clientele would not have left the company if you were so adept at keeping them. Feeling the weight of their accusations, I argued back. My father sighed. See, I don't want to watch the family company fail. It provides me with income and allows me to maintain my way of life. Because of all of this, Olivia has also broken up with me. Rather than try to work out this continuing family drama, I would just like to enjoy my retired life in peace. Please simply return to work for your brother and quit being so self-centered. The atmosphere grew heavier, and the room appeared to get smaller. I realized that this was not at all the apology or closure I had hoped for. Rather, it seemed like an effort to force me back into a circumstance that I had worked so hard to escape. I got to my feet, stunned and hurt, my rage building. I sent my dad a look and said, "I'm done with this conversation. I'll be happy to watch your company fail." And with that, I left the unpleasant conversation. Dad and Michael have been inundating me with calls and texts ever since our talk. They have been disparaging me and holding me responsible for everything. Seeing how my own family tries to profit from my labors has emotionally traumatized me, therefore I have blocked them for the time being. Update 3. I haven't given an update in 6 months. I'm glad to share that my business is doing well, and I also have big plans to ask my girlfriend to marry me very soon. I'm excited to be happily married to her since she is unquestionably the one for me. In a less optimistic vein. While Michael drove his firm to the ground, my dad had to deal with difficulties. Ultimately, my dad was forced to sell the entire company to a different corporation. Unfortunately, he did not profit much from the transaction, and little he did obtain Olivia claimed in their divorce. I have deliberately obstructed their communication and removed myself from both of them. I quote, V occasionally had chats with family and friends concerning these events. My mother and I have surprisingly become closer over the months. She treats Michael and me equally, which is contrary to expectations, and has been a source of understanding and support throughout this turbulent time. She is understanding of what I'm doing and is encouraging of my new venture. Additionally, she told me that Michael intends to return to accounting now that the business has collapsed. In spite of the difficulties in my family. I'm appreciative of my personal happiness and security. Concentrating on the positives, my mother's support and the relationship I have with my partner are vital sources of strength. I'm still committed to making my business ventures successful. I'm determined to use obstacles as chances for improvement and achievement, and I have hope for the future.